everyone. My name is Clara. I'm from Italy, and today I'm here with my co-hosts Ihang and Min to talk about a very important topic, which is work-life balance. You guys want to say hi?
Hi everyone, my name is Ihang and I'm from China.
Hi everyone, I am Min from Myanmar.
Thank you guys for being here. We're missing our fourth co-host Artemis, but she will join us later. We actually came across this topic after a class discussion. So we are master's students and we will have to face placements very soon to enter the job market. And we were just discussing about what we find important in job adverts and what kind of work we would like to do in the future. We come from different countries and different continents, and this really changes our perception of work-life balance. Min, you have the most work experiences between the four of us. Can you tell us what these experiences taught you and what you value in a job?
Sure, I work in both public and private sectors in Myanmar. Let me say, based on my experience, there are differences in public and private sectors in my country, Myanmar. And my first job was at the private sector in Myanmar, and I had to work 6 days a week. And then I moved to an international organization. I only had to work 5 days a week, and I could find more time for myself and for my family. I think if we can have more time, we can have a better work-life balance in our life. Jihan, how do you think?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think normally people would have a better work-life balance if they work in public sector, whether it's a government job or international organizations. I have experienced something similar with you, Min. So there are two internships that I did before, which have very contrasting work-life balance situation. The first one would be in a startup, which produces high-quality podcast episodes, actually. And since it's a startup, everyone was pretty passionate. And my team was focused on a podcast show that was centered around technology and businesses in our daily lives. Everyone just joined the whole process of like pitching topics, doing research, scripting, recording, uploading, everything. So we work as a really close team. And so everyone felt this responsibility to contribute to the team. Consequently, you would work really, really hard and working long hours to achieve that goal, especially when something went wrong. So at that time, I could easily work till 10 p.m., 11 p.m., and I wasn't paid really well, but I think I was pretty happy still because I really enjoyed the work. And also I enjoy working with the people at that time. Another internship I had was a recent one, and I worked in an international organization. And I did have a pretty good work-life balance. I worked from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. I worked like 3 days a week. So it's pretty good rhythm and balance. Since the things I was working on, I didn't feel that personal, very passionate. It does feel more like a job instead of something I'm really passionate about. I think that's also relates to what you're looking for in a job. If you're really enjoying the work you're doing, you're naturally willing to put into more hours and efforts. Maybe sometimes it's even at the expense of the other areas in your life. Yeah.
So would you say that for you it's more important to have passion and a good team dynamic rather than maybe fixed hours, maybe a better salary? Well, what is the compromise for you, Ian?
I think that's a really good question. I think at least now I'm young and I still have interest and passion for things. I would like to work in an environment that's more encouraging for innovation, for teamwork, for new ideas. So I'm willing to put into more efforts and more hours, even if it's a little bit demanding. But if I really enjoyed it, I think it's actually okay for me. But of course, everyone wants a good salary. It's always a tough balance to strike. What about you?
Well, my work experience is actually in Germany. I worked in NGOs, private and public sector. And I think I can say that public sector or NGOs are my favorite type of work. And for me, it's essential that First of all, I have flexibility, like the possibility of working from home, and not just working from home like in the same country, but also maybe to do it in Italy where I have my family. And at the same time, I would also like my job to be useful for society. I want to do something good for people or the environment, animals. Yeah, to have like sort of relevance in like for the collectivity.
Yeah.
So this is what I look in a job, like a meaning.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you tell us a bit more about your working experiences in Germany?
Well, there are pros and cons about every sector in which I work in. For instance, I worked for an NGO, which was organizing volunteering projects in environmental projects around the world, but especially in Europe and Germany. I really liked that it was very chill environment, and you could also to have first-hand experience on really working in the forest, also with young people. It was really nice environment. But for instance, there was a huge shift when I switched to like a private school where I was working as a salesperson and study advisor. It was very hectic. I realized that I don't like it. Also because the company wasn't really allowing me to work from home, even if I think that the tasks that I had to do were really easy to do at home. My last experience was actually Schumann traineeship for the European Parliament, the representation of the European Parliament in southern Germany, in Munich. I think so far it was the best type of job that I had because I could mix my experiences in PR and communication and share my passion for collectivity and to have a meaning in our society. You could talk to people and at the same time deal with very important personalities because I worked during the European elections. The only thing maybe is that while working on the elections, I didn't have fixed working hours. It was a very chaotic schedule, very hectic. Worth it, definitely, but it really made me question about work-life balance. This is also what led us to explore further the concept of work-life balance in our paper because we chose to compare Germany and China with their respective policies with regard to work-life balance. We decided to address these two countries because, well, we are in Germany right now, spending our first semester in Göttingen, and I have work experience in Germany. Ihan is from China and Min is from Myanmar, which is culturally close to China, and these two countries are also very relevant in their respective areas. We decided to compare how actually these countries got to their policies with regard to work-life balance and which factors actually played an important role in achieving nowadays policies and regulations. For instance, what is striking is, of course, like different practices and cultural perception of working time and time that you spend with your family or just, doing leisure activities. For me, also, like in Germany was already a big difference from my home country in Italy. And one thing that I really needed to adapt to is the fact that for example, on Sundays, everything is closed.
Yeah.
And it really forces you to rest.
I remember I told my parents that all the supermarkets and a lot of shops will be closed on Sundays. They would be like, so Germans don't do business? They don't like to do business on a Sunday? I guess compared with China, traditionally Germany is a more of a Christian, especially Protestant culture, and people value Sundays a lot as a sacred time for people to rest, to reflect, to spend time with their family. And it's not just a pause, it also has these spiritual undertones.
Yeah, I find it really nice that almost every job has like Sunday as day off. It really feels like a collective rest day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's nice to have that kind of boundary and separation as well. Because Kra also mentioned like working in PR. I was working in also media. All the information is just circulating on the internet and everyone just consuming content at all the time and you feel like it cannot stop really. You constantly check your messages or emails and you feel like you couldn't switch off.
Yeah, I'm very happy that, I'm not happy that Corona happened, but I feel like it really made clear that when boundaries between work times and family time, just your free time in general, are blurry, it is very complicated and it can affect your health. I'm happy that the European Union is discussing about creating regulation concerning the right to disconnect. It really is about the employees' health, both physical and mental. With COVID, it showed even more blatantly that women have to care about others, like the caregiving role of women. It still is always on women. If we women have to work from home, it can be quite overwhelming.
Yeah, because automatically by default, all the work at home is just assigned naturally to women because there is no physical separation that enables women to focus on their career.
It would be nice to have a right to disconnect also from family chores.
It reminds me of the concept of Feierabend in Germany. People just value the time after work and then make it a thing that you need to rest, you need to take a break, you need to have a clear boundary. I think it's nice, and actually it's something was also in Martin Luther's writings. I was pretty surprised when I was doing the research.
Wow, that's impressive how
Yeah.
this concept has been, maybe not with this name, but it has been in cultural practices since for centuries.
Yeah, actually it's exactly the wording, Feierabend.
I feel at the same time that unfortunately not every area in the world can think about right to disconnect or better working conditions for employees.
Yeah, that's true. Because if we're talking about right to disconnect, there is a underlying assumption that a lot of things will be done online. But this is not the case for a lot of manual labor jobs, which still exist in a lot of factories in China or in Germany, especially in China, I guess.
Yeah, Chinese economy is still developing. It can be said that it is the world's largest economy driven by its industries like manufacturing, technology, e-commerce, and exports. They also focus on high GDP growth. Global competitiveness has created a demanding work environment in China. The growth of mega cities and urban centers has intensified work pressure in China.
So I guess in factories, there are a lot of workers who work just nonstop. It's really hard for them to not work basically because they need to work long hours to support themselves financially. And especially when they have families, it's even harder. The concept of right to disconnect just means barely anything to them. Another one is competitive market environment in China that produce a lot of demanding or even toxic working environment in especially big tech companies. And we have the notorious 996 from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m., 6 days a week, maybe working even longer hours than this. You cannot really switch off. And sometimes people still have this pressure. It's not like clearly stated, but you feel this way, especially when the power distance is structured in a way that makes you feel like hard to say no to your boss.
Yeah, while researching, I found it striking how much difference it makes, like the sector in China, for instance, where you're working, because of public sector enables better work-life balance practices and policies rather than the private sector. And there is also a huge difference between rural and urban areas, which makes it difficult to make homogeneous policies that safeguard workforce. For instance, it has been actually very interesting to see how China has developed and improved policies to safeguard workforce since 1949, which is when the country unified, till present days, because there have been so many changes and crises as well, not just the economic crisis, the COVID pandemic, but also demographic changes. After one-child policy, also an aging population, but it has highlighted issues and now the Chinese government tries to give allowances to support workers. And some companies are, for instance, also providing housing to workers, which is, I think, a really good step forward in enabling better conditions to workers.
Yeah, especially some state-owned enterprises, they will just support their employees with really, really cheap housing options per month. I know a friend actually, and she works for one of the biggest airline companies in China, which is like state-owned, and she pays like 400 RMB, which is like 50 euros, something like that, for a month to live in a small apartment, maybe with another flatmate. But it's already pretty cheap and pretty affordable to live in a top tier Chinese city.
Yeah, I feel like it's good that governments really address more and more issues that are now emerging in present society. I feel like maybe in China the right to disconnect maybe will come. I mean, it's not here in Europe yet, but I think there will be discussions and for every type of worker. And as we address, there are different development stages and in like industrialization stages, and I want to be positive about improvement.
Yeah, I do think nowadays with digitalization, people have more requirements in terms of flexibility. And we have seen this phenomenon of digital nomads. People can just work from wherever in the world they want, as long as they can, do their job and also just be connected with the working community. And the location seems less important now, especially people can leverage that kind of flexibility. You earn euros and you spend in Thailand, a lot of nomads in Thailand. And it's a pretty good life that you can afford because of course the cost of living there is much lower, and so people would make such choices. I'm sure those things are happening in China as well. The first company I mentioned, the startup, because it's a very young environment, most people are pretty young and really understanding as well, saying like you have this emergency or you have this situation that you cannot really handle immediately. It's also okay just to voice your situation. And people understand if you're off, then it's off. It's just when the task is at hand and the episode needs to be uploaded tomorrow and you will have a really packed schedule. But normally people understand your schedules and I can work remotely as well.
I think also in like the Generation Z, I think it's one of our values that work is not as important as our private life. I hope that generational change will make it easier for employees to have a better condition, not just in work, but in like the private life while working on our paper. Did you find something that made you change your own perception of work-life balance?
Okay, I have found out from my research after writing this paper that we need to have a work-life balance in our life, and it is very important. Right now, we discovered that this is very important to have very good working environment. We also need to get a very good leave policy. These are the things that I think they are very important.
I think it is true that our generation is trying to balancing the responsibilities from work and outside work better, or trying to emphasize your life outside work. It matters a lot as well, and work isn't the only way that we value ourselves, we define ourselves. For our parents' generation, work is really, really important, is how they define their identities essentially. And nowadays we have other ways to understand ourselves besides just from work. That's why also I think nowadays more and more people treat work just as an instrument as a tool to support yourself financially, which is sometimes I think it's kind of sad because from my point of view, I would wish that my work is fulfilling, is something that I can gain growth from. But maybe nowadays this wish is somewhat unrealistic. It's really hard to find something that suits you, that fulfills you, but also gives you some kind of work-life balance. Maybe some more and more people just would like to work like a corporate job. Maybe you don't like it that much, but it offers some kind of financial stability, or material comfort that can enable you to have an actual life outside of your work. And then in China, we have this term of 内卷. It means basically a toxic culture in which people are expected to keep ahead of others. So let's say we write a paper and then someone writes like 15 pages and then the other person will like 20 pages, and then just constantly it's like kind of meaningless competition, just adding up pages. And now people just lying flat, counting, like silent resistance towards the system. You also have like quiet quitting.
Oh, is it that people just take jobs without even notifying the employer?
I thought it's like you just do your bare minimum, and you don't really want to try hard that much because the work itself doesn't really matter to you that much. Sometimes you even feel like it's meaningless. There are a lot of bullshit jobs. You don't want to pull yourself into the work.
Wow, this is very interesting concept. I was thinking about my sister. She is also one of those people that think that jobs are just a mean to get to earn
A
money.
means to an end. Yeah.
Exactly. And it doesn't need to be super fancy or the career is not that important. She just wants something that is not too demanding and where she's good at, and it's not the definition of her personality. I think it's also how oneself sees life in general.
Yeah.
I'm personally somebody that cares a lot, and that's why I don't like to be like, oh no, I just do the bare minimum. I always engage myself a lot, and that's why I think, for instance, I look for jobs that have a meaning, or at least are meaningful to me, a purpose, so that it aligns also with my personal values. And yeah, as you said, you were very passionate while working at this podcast recording startup. I think my personal values align with also a company's just strategy, but also tradition of work practices. It's the best combination. It's just difficult, I think, to get enough money and enough rest, enough room for improvement, because it's also important to feel that if you are in a good company or whatever sector, that you have the chance to grow, not just as an employee, but as a person.
I do think nowadays we just ask more things from jobs than ever. Like we expect a lot of things from work, and then with the inflation of higher education, everyone has a university degree, and we feel like we're entitled to work a really good job, even if we just enter the job market. Sometimes I have this problem as well. I feel like, oh, I have this and that. I should be able to get this internship or job, but probably sometimes I should be more humble to realize that actually career is a continuous journey that you need time and experience and knowledge just to gain from practical experiences, of course, and to really gradually working towards the direction you want to arrive. It's not something you would get immediately right after graduation.
Yeah, I like it that in Germany there is this concept of like Weiterbildung. So weiter is like to go on, and Bildung is education. It's like ongoing learning. I actually attended some workshops when I was trying to realize in which direction I wanted to go, because after NGO it was like, okay, it has its perks, but it's not good paid, and it's also I did it as like a civil service. Then I switched to private sector, and it was way too much, like too stressful. I couldn't do much for people. I felt like, and I think that is like something that's not just employment agency, but companies should also invest in.
Yes, you're right. The education is also very important for its employer, so the people can work more effectively, more efficiently, and they can also take holidays, and they can also get more free time, and they can spend with their hobbies and their families, so they can get better work-life balance.
Well, now I will switch to Artemis. She's from Switzerland. She did research regarding gender-based differences with regard to work-life balance and gender roles in society when it comes to employment.
Thank you so much, Clara. Yes, that's right. Hello, I'm Artemis. So let's talk about work-life balance with a bit more of a topic on gender. And as I said before, it's not just about juggling work and personal life. but has many more variables tangled to that. Because here's the thing, men and women experience work-life balance quite differently, and the gap between them is often shaped by societal expectations, cultural norms, and even government policies. Women in particular tend to carry a heavier load when it comes to unpaid responsibilities like childcare and housework. And this imbalance isn't just a personal issue, it's a systemic one that plays out differently across countries. Take Germany and China as the examples that were previously stated. Because both countries have made strides in supporting women in the workforce, but the challenges they face are starkly different. For example, in Germany, shorter working hours and progressive policies help create better work-life balance overall, but even there, women are more likely to take on part-time jobs or handle caregiving duties, roles that often come at the expense of their career progression. Because truly, in China, Confucian values place a relatively stronger emphasis on some family obligations, which would put even more pressure on women to juggle work and home life. So while both countries show gender imbalances in work-life balance, the cultural and structural factors behind them can vary quite significantly. Let's break this down further. In China, only 7% of fathers report being the main caregivers in their families, compared to 40% of mothers. In Germany, caregiving is slightly more balanced, but still skewed. 30% of mothers are still caregivers versus just 6% of fathers. What does this mean? Well, women in both countries are shouldering a disproportionate share of domestic responsibilities, which inevitably impacts the ability to achieve balance between work and life. Then there's the question of working hours. In China, fathers work an average of 45 hours a week compared to mothers' 41 hours, a relatively small gap. But in Germany, the difference is much larger. Fathers average 43.5 hours per week, while mothers clock in at just over 30 hours. This is partly because more German women seem to work part-time jobs, which might seem like an advantage for balance at first glance. But when you factor in the unpaid domestic labor they're doing at home, it becomes clear that this so-called balance often comes at a great cost. Job security is another piece of the puzzle. In Germany, vulnerable employment, so jobs with little stability or benefits, is incredibly low for both men and women, sitting at around 45%. In China, it's much higher. 43% for women and 41% for men. This lack of job security adds another layer of stress for Chinese workers, particularly women who are already balancing so much. And let's not forget about health, both mental and physical, which is deeply tied to work-life balance. Women in both countries report higher stress levels than men, reflecting the strain of juggling multiple roles. And while physical activity can help alleviate stress, women tend to participate less in sport or exercise than men in both China and Germany. So where does this leave us? Well, despite some progress, like more women entering the workforce or improved parental leave policies, work-life balance remains elusive for many people, especially women. The data suggests that while Germany generally offers better conditions for balance as compared to China, at least seemingly, significant gender gaps seem to persist in both countries. Ultimately, achieving true work-life balance requires more than just individual effort. It demands systemic change, whether it's through better policies that support families or cultural shifts that challenge traditional gender roles. There's still a long way to go before we can truly say that life and work are balanced for everyone. Then, moving on to my personal opinion. So I really love what my colleagues said and agree with so many of the points, especially with regards to culture and gender-related variables. As for me, I might have a slightly different stance on some things relating to work-life balance, but just for me personally, I don't really feel like the concept really personally feels and applies to me because I consider work and personal life to pretty much be one and the same and enjoy them similarly. Let me explain a bit more. Since I was quite young, I had already started doing some freelance work in design, illustration and photography during various intervals, which I also considered a hobby. So, I really enjoyed doing it. Since then, I have had some volunteering and or working experiences in a wide variety of organizations, like the Red Cross, WWF, Amnesty International. I have also worked for individuals, such as being a teacher assistant and by doing some consulting. I also worked in various private companies like school, hotel, university. Also worked for public institutions. Actually, all these experiences, I really like how they kind of challenge my brain. I really consider them a part of my life and something that, I just do, like cooking or brushing my teeth. I might not necessarily enjoy doing them, but they are part of my personal life. I consider, even if something is work, it can be enjoyable or not. But I wouldn't really draw the line between the two. Actually, overall, my favorite experience so far has actually been to manage various departments in the international organization ISAC in Göttingen. So yeah, in all honesty, I think I don't really have a concept of work-life balance because in my life, there are things I enjoy and things I don't enjoy. I often enjoy working because it challenges my brain and I can get to build various experiences and knowledge. And also we can meet a wide variety of people. Although, of course, it's not always good and there can be some stressful situations. So for me, work-life balance isn't so important. I'm just happy as long as my days are fulfilling and enjoyable and not too stressful, whether in and out of work. And interestingly, to draw on some points that were said by my colleagues earlier, as I said earlier, ISEC is my favorite international organization in which I've partaken into. Despite actually this experience has actually been feeling the most intense regarding workload than I've ever done. It actually feels more intense than when I worked at 100%, 6 days a week, full-time in a 5-star hotel. I think my side doesn't actually really match as much with some experiences of my colleagues because it is in NGOs that I've had a feeling of a more intense workload. Though, as said previously, I don't really mind a high workload. I enjoy the challenge, as long as it's not overwhelming, of course. And I'm not overwhelmed. I'm happy. It's fine. But yeah, maybe it's just a coincidence. It just so happens that my experiences in NGOs and public-private sectors, maybe I happened to work under very passionate people and colleagues who were fostering much work and in a really structured environment, contrarily in some private sectors where people may have had less of a sense of purpose and maybe think it's all right not to work as much. I've been quite surprised actually by the variety of environments I've been in. So I think it would be really interesting to study these different environments more in depth. Anyways, yeah, these were some of my thoughts. So I'll hand the mic back to my colleagues. Thank you for having me. Goodbye.
Thank you, Artemis, for sharing these valuable insights with also very concrete data that help us realize how strong imbalances between men and women still persist when it comes to work-life balance and caregiving. I feel like it is often forgotten how much all of this impacts physical and mental health, and it is so true that working part-time is not really an indicator of balancing work and life, caused by all the unpaid domestic labor which women mostly take up. It is actually fascinating how you address the concept of work-life balance by eliminating the contrast that is like implicit in its definition. It feels like so harmonious how you see work as part of your life, as something that fills your day with meaning, and maybe we should all see it so positively rather than as a burden. I think we can wrap up today's chat by saying that the concept of work-life balance is evolving, and it has been evolving for centuries. It is important to reflect on the factors that made countries such as Germany and China reach their current policies when it comes to safeguarding workers, as culture and economy, for instance, play an important role. At the same time, it is also true that imbalances between men and women still persist, and we cannot stress enough how change cannot happen without institutional support. Nowadays, work is just among a variety of things that people can draw meaning from, and it is particularly true for younger generations. It will be interesting to see how these new perspectives will come into practice in the next decades, but for now, it's all from our side. Thank you very much for listening, and a huge thanks to my wonderful co-hosts Ihang, Min, and Artemis. Bye!